Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Bud Riss. I'm chairman of the board of Boston Harbor Now. Welcome to our monthly harbor use public forum. We're waiting for the COVID numbers to turn the other direction, and hopefully that will happen soon. But for the moment, we're still doing these forums by Zoom, and I suspect going forward, we'll probably do some sort of hybrid version or just keep it on Zoom because I think this has facilitated pretty good participation, but we'll work that out going forward. I'm joined by a number of other staff members from Boston Harbor Now, Alice Brown, who I think you all know, Kathy Abbott, our president and CEO, and Aaron Toffler, who works with Alice in our planning and policy work. So good morning again, everyone. I think as everybody knows, if you participated in these forums before, Boston Harbor Now focuses on expanding public access to the harbor and ensuring that new development is resilient to the impacts and risks caused by climate change. We hold these forums generally on a monthly basis to provide opportunities for people to learn more about either planning initiatives or individual private sector development projects around the harbor. I think as most of you know, Boston Harbor Now regularly participates in the licensing and permitting review for these projects and is very active on a lot of things happening around Boston Harbor. Okay, so we have a large and very welcome project team here with us today. We're going to hear about Parcels O and P over in the Ray Flynn Marine Park. This is a project of Marcus Partners, and our group this morning is going to be introduced by Andrew Mackin. Boston Harbor Now has been following this project since its inception quite a while ago. I think we've had a number of conversations with the Marcus Partners group, and I think I'm very pleased to say we've seen some very good improvements in the projects during the process, over the last several months. They'll review the licensing process where they are, but it's good for everybody to know that they have completed the Article 80 process and are now approaching, I think, the Chapter 91, but you'll hear more about that from the rest of the group. So I'm going to turn it over to the group right now. Take it away.
Thank you, Bud, and good morning, everyone. Kristen, if you could just pull the presentation up as we get started. But my name is Andrew Mack, and I'm with Marcus Partners, as Bud mentioned. For those who are not familiar with our firm, we're a real estate and development firm based here in Boston. We're the developers of Parcels O and P. I'm joined here by several of my colleagues, Patrick Souza, Mike Scannell, Mary Kensinger. And I think something as a firm, we're very active in the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park, which outside of this development, we are also the developers of 310 Northern Avenue, sometimes referred to as Parcel X. So we had submitted an LOI for that in July of this year. And we also recently submitted on 22 Dry Dock, which is just around the corner. We are one of 3 firms pursuing that project with the city. And that is a development we are very excited about. Our presentation, I'd encourage you to look at the proposal that was submitted. So for today, though, for Parcels O and P, a quick introduction of our team. And the structure of our presentation today is going to be 20 or 30 minutes. It's a smaller group here on this forum. So we would encourage questions, have it become conversational, and this is here for you to get information about our project. And we'd be happy to answer any questions. So our design is led by, it's a joint venture between SGA and Dream Collaborative. Kristen O'Gorman is here from SGA. Kristen will be presenting our design. Kristen's also joined by Troy DePisa from Dream Collaborative. We gave Troy the day off, so Troy won't be speaking, and he's on for the first 30 minutes if there's any questions for Troy. Our landscape architect is Copley Wolf. Christine Wilson will be speaking about our landscape design, specifically around our plant selection and our thoughts and the efforts into landscape specific to this neighborhood. Chris Hodney of Mitch Engineering is our civil engineer. Chris is going to be speaking about resiliency and stormwater management. Colin Schless of Thornton Tomasetti. Colin's our sustainability consultant. Sustainability is an area of this project that through Article 80 and really from inception has been a focus. Colin has been just absolutely instrumental in allowing us to just raise the bar and set a new standard on sustainability. So we'll talk about that in our presentation. Also joined by Jamie Fay and Ken Fields, 4 Point Associates. They, Jamie and Ken, have helped us with our environmental and permitting aspects for this project. Just a snapshot of our team, but wanted to say, I think as a firm, we've been very intentional about how we form this team. There's numerous joint ventures on the design side. There will be joint ventures on the construction side, and then really into building operations is something that we're going to be looking at for how can we encourage diversity, equity, inclusion in our team and our development. So something that's at the forefront of our mind for really all of our projects that we do. Kristen, if you go to the next slide. So today, introductions, which we just did, context, project details, I'll cover that. Kristen's going to get into the evolution of design. And with Copley Wolf, we'll be talking about our design in our public realm. We've got resiliency that Mitch will lead, and then sustainable design Colin will end with, and then questions and dialogue. So again, you can ask them through or you can hold any questions to the end. A few high level, just kind of overview, and the presentation was set up, but looking at that survey at the beginning, some folks, this is the first time you've heard about our project. We'll try to give you an all-encompassing overview of the project. For those who have followed us all the way through our submissions and public meetings, this will also be an update for you. So we've tried to have both audiences in mind. As Bud noted, in August, we received our Article 80 approval. This was kind of a culmination of submission. So we submitted our letter of intent in December of 2020. We filed our P&F in April. And then really from April and continuing now today, but through that process, very busy summer. We had a lot of public meetings, a lot of great feedback. And I think as we open the meeting with kind of some of the initiatives of Boston Harbor Now related to access and resiliency, those are two areas that we think the development responded to well. And we think in addition, sustainability are really kind of three areas where we feel we are a leader. The project at a high level is going to be a 219,000 square foot research and development, so life science facility. That's on the parcel O to the right. The parcel to the left, parcel P, is going to be an adaptive reuse of the existing facility. That'll be an amenity building. Kristen will talk about that. We think that's a really special building, and we're excited about not just that building, but the public realm that's been created in front of that building. Between the two parcels is formerly Aubon Pan Way. We wanted to just highlight that, and this was thought through for our development, just based on our location, based on the neighborhood, the working waterfront, and access to dry dock number 3 was paramount. So our development will not change the access to the dry dock, so we will preserve. We have no maritime use on our site, but we have been very strategic in designing and developing our site to make sure that there's no change in access. The use will stay the same, so it's zoned currently as general industrial, stays general industrial. No new on-site parking is something that we wanted to highlight. So we have roughly 96 on-site parking spaces permitted. And I think if anyone was following along or read the P&F, the transportation study indicated that there will be no significant impact on the area of traffic operations as a result of our development, partially due to the use like signs. They don't necessarily run the traditional 9-to-5 operation. But with that said, we still believe that it's prudent to just encourage alternative forms of transportation. So a few initiatives, a few aspects related to that is we partnered with the Seaport TMA and several other developers in this neighborhood. We studied the design of Pier 10 which could open up a water ferry service nearby. We think that would be a great solution for this neighborhood and something that we support and we're excited about. We're committed to working with PBIC and the BPA to implementing a shuttle service. So there's several shuttles that already operate into in this neighborhood, but they operate really within this neighborhood. So I think there's a conversation and a process that we'll work with the city, with the TMA and others on how can we expand shuttle service outside of this neighborhood so that access to this neighborhood is improved. And bikes. I think bikes are a great mode of transportation. This neighborhood has also a heavy industrial use, so we have to be mindful of how bikes come to and from. And that's, I think, as a developer that's working on several parcels in this neighborhood, we want to be involved in that and improve that area. But our facility will have on-site bike parking. We'll have shower facilities as well to encourage that mode of mentioned it briefly, but diversity and inclusion has been integral throughout our whole thought process on the development. The next bullet is a new concept to some. You may have seen there was an article in the Boston Globe, I think it's 3 or 4 weeks old now, around the city's initiative for a climate resiliency infrastructure fund. Marcus Partners was the first developer to partner with the city, and this is something that we're thrilled to be involved with. So our development as a standalone development has put into place resiliency measures, which we'll talk about. And I think this neighborhood, which is subject to future storm coastal flooding, needs not just a building by building approach, but it also needs district-wide solutions. That is exactly what this infrastructure fund was designed to do. So the developers and developers in this neighborhood will contribute to the fund on an annual basis, and that will allow for the city to really roll out larger district-wide solutions, such as improvements to the seawall or other things that could mitigate future climate change. So we will be Chapter 91 compliant. We're going through a process, so just kind of maybe taking a step back where we are. I touched on that we've gone through the Article 80 approvals process at a city level. On a state level, we have gone through a NEPA process early on. We've completed the NEPA process. We have submitted an application for a minor revision to the Chapter 91. We are hopeful that there'll be a public notice issued shortly and a 30-day public comment period that follows. So we are in the middle of our Chapter 91 approval. And on the tail end of Chapter 91 approval, we hope to start construction at the end of Q1 of 2022, so around March of 2022 is when we'd like to go vertical. This fall, there may be some early enabling work on site later in the fall, but really the bulk of our new construction won't commence until spring of next year. Colin is going to talk about sustainability. He'll give us the detail, but I think high level of the development is we've worked really, really hard to eliminate the use of fossil fuels in this development. That's unique for a life science building, and that came out of through the Article 80 process, through public comment, through feedback. This development will be one of the most sustainable life science buildings in the city. It's something we're really proud of. It's something that we partnered with the city to figure out how we could be a leader, and we think this is a great example of what developments can do in the future. And lastly, before I hand it over to Kristen, we just wanted to note that this building is going to be the future home to Ginkgo Bioworks. And Ginkgo is an extremely interesting and exciting company. They're an existing Marine Park tenant. They are a synthetic biology company. They are growing, and this is a growth. So they are going to stay in the Marine Park. They love the Marine Park, and they're currently at 27 dry dock. They're going to expand into our building. And for anybody who has been following the headlines, Ginkgo actually went public last Friday, and they are valued as the second largest biotechnology company in the history of public offerings. So only behind Pfizer, which is a big name. So I think we're thrilled about Ginkgo. The science that they're doing is incredible. And with that, I think we should dig in on our design, and I'll turn it over to Kristen to talk through that.
Great, thanks. Kristen O'Gorman with SGA. Thanks for having us this morning. Just quickly to orient everybody on where we are in the world, we're in the Marine Industrial Park. We have two parcels, O and P. It's this panhandle shaped site here adjacent to the dry dock. For those that are new to this project, we thought it'd be helpful to kind of run through how we ended up where we are today in terms of our building. So as Andrew noted, we have two existing buildings on our site, the Auburn Pond building, and then 3 Anchor Way, which is the McDonald's steel building. Preserving the working waterfront and access to the dry dock was one of the largest design drivers here, which really located our building for us. We made sure that we maintained that access both on Anchor Way and Auburn Pond Way. We're going to be demoing the Auburn Pond building and virtually constructing in its footprint that it is today. And then we'll be preserving the Parcel P building into amenity building to support the larger tenant. We're looking at 8 levels of R&D plus mechanicals. All of this will be kept under the FAA height limits from the Logan airspace. Moving on to some of the articulation of the building, we are raising our first floor 4 feet above average grade, and this is in response to sea level rise. We are also raising critical infrastructure an additional foot above that. So this building will stay online in the storm event. And then what that's allowed us to do is articulate our entryway here. And we've created what we're calling a porch. You know, this is a new typology that will be found in the city where other projects will also have to raise their first floor above the average grade of the infrastructure of the roads. And so there's different ways to resolve that. And we use this as an opportunity to create a celebrated dock expression in porch for our building, which we'll get into on future slides. And then last, we really focus a lot of our efforts on the public realm, connecting this plaza in front of Parcel P that Christine will talk about to our porch. And then we'll also get into some of the inspiration for our articulation. This is a snapshot here, and the slide is titled, "What has changed?" And so this is what has changed since we submitted our P&F in April. I think the headline here is what Andrew touched on, is our sustainability measures. I think through this process with the city, the building is in a better place than where it started. So the way we were able to reduce carbon emissions and nearly eliminate fossil fuels is by the investment of air source heat pumps. We also work with the city on some articulation of the penthouse, materiality, as I noted, the public realm. We are going to be in compliance with Boston's complete streets at our sidewalks. So our sidewalk widths have increased, and we have tree and planting strips along the edge of our property as well. We're adding solar panels to Parcel O's south-facing penthouse and to Parcel P. Parcel P will also be 100% electric VRF and will be in compliance with LEED Gold standards as well. So even though that is not new construction, we're doing as much as we can to also tell a similar sustainability story there. Christine will go into the design of the plaza more. We're really excited about that too. And then another note is that we've just implemented a lot of art here. I'm working with the city. They seem quite excited about that. We're hoping to wrap the Parcel P building in some form of art, use it as a canvas, and link that to some of our backup house loading dock doors, and then also looking to use pavement art to connect the parcels together. We've thought of this project as kind of 3 components. We have Parcel P, we have Parcel O, and then we do have the parking area. And so we're able to carry art and some of our streetscapes through the project to make it feel cohesive. Just to orient you all again in plan, so Parcel P is this amenity building where the indoor bike parking will be located. The plaza is out front. We have showers and lockers in the main Parcel O building. We also just wanted to highlight that we do, on top of the indoor bike parking, have convenience racks located throughout the site. We've also worked in a ride share and drop off too, so to pull cars off of Fid Kennedy into our site. And then we do have 25% of our lot for electric vehicles. And I just wanted to note too, I think Andrew touched on it, but this relationship between pedestrians and trucks was kind of a design driver as well through this process. It's that separation. It's protecting the trucks from the people and the people from the trucks. And so there's different ways that we've looked at doing that. The design of our plaza, pulling people in, the elevated porch actually pulls people up and away from the street. And then little things like the rideshare drop off, just pulling cars off of Fid Kennedy, which is a trucking route that we need to preserve. Our loading and electrical and some of our other backup house is located more adjacent to the loading dock here, and we will load off of Aubin Pond Way. Jumping into a little bit of inspiration for the architecture, we really looked to the neighborhood. We were very much inspired by the rigor found at the IDB, this historic typology, and then also some of the steel shapes and materiality found throughout the park or the area, such as in Conley Terminal. Sustainability doesn't just mean, the resiliency measures and some of the mechanics we're putting in the building, but the actual design was thoughtful with that as well. We wanted to maximize our daylighting and views, but also minimize our vision glass. So we've strategically located our glass to respond to being most appreciated on the interior of the building. So we've looked at the program that will be in here, which is a life science company. And then we've worked back from there. And then as noted, looking towards the inspiration of the IDB, we've kind of layered on this rigor and rhythm, but utilizing steel shapes that were maybe more found in Conley Terminal. Our total building average of vision glass is actually 33%, which we're quite proud of. We've also looked at orientation as well. So our south side is more opaque and our north side is more vision glass as well to respond to that. Dropping you down to the ground here, you're looking towards our entry base and this dock expression that we've described, that once again, inspired by the IDB and that loading dock expression there. Using this elevation change as an opportunity for step planters and bleachers and to really celebrate this entry. We're also looking to use warmer materials down at the base. We're looking to be inspired by black and steel above, but maybe more of a wood look at the base to warm it up, have it be a more tactile material where people will be next to it experiencing it. You're also starting to see a hint of a suggestion of that pavement art that will cross over Aubin Pond Way and connect back towards the plaza at Parcel P. Looking down Aubin Pond Way, you're catching the side of our loading docks, which we're suggesting some sort of mural to mimic what we would be implementing at the Parcel P building. Just bringing you up on that porch so you can start to experience that. Once again, lifting people up and away from that trucking route. And then looking back towards the Parcel P building. And the art that you're seeing here is a placeholder. We're going to be working with the city to nail that down. But the story that we've been working with them is that this art wants to represent the neighborhood, the marine park, but also the tenant, which is a biology company. So that's why you're seeing a hint of coral and starfish, because that's the play between biology and marine, which we think has a nice synergy. Even though these buildings are different, we're looking to link them with some materiality. There's an existing addition on the front of Parcel P that we are removing, but keeping the structure of. And we'll be looking to add that kind of warm wood look on the soffit there to mimic the soffit overhang that's found at Parcel O. And once again, implementing some blackened steel there too. And with that, I will turn it over to Christine to talk a little bit more about the public realm. And Christine, just let me know when you want me to flip the slides.
Will do. Thank you, Kristen. So Christine Wilson, the landscape architect with Copley Wolf Design Group. Good morning, everyone. I want to first kind of dig into the pedestrian experience. Kristen already mentioned this, but we are implementing the principles of complete streets along the entire frontage of this project. So to bring your attention to the sections on the right, the top one is cut through the streetscape Parcel P, and the bottom one is cut through the, the Parcel O with the front porch. So we are widening the sidewalk and pulling it away from the roadway curb to introduce a tree line planting strip to help buffer pedestrians from the trucks and the trucks from the pedestrians. Also, as far as the pedestrian experience, if you're coming via bus or from the Innovation Design Building or elsewhere in the Seaport, you will be walking towards this street, to this project along Fig Kennedy, coming from the west. So looking kind of at this diagram, that's the bottom right. So you first approach parcel P. And there we have the parcel P Plaza. So we've created this wide entry from the intersection, from those crosswalks into this space. And I'll get more into the design of that on the next slide. Before we move forward, I just want to also kind of highlight that we are reducing the number of curb cuts along this stretch. We have the roadway up on Penn Way that is between parcels P and O that maintains the working waterfront access to the dry dock behind. And then we have the parking area entrance. So at these two moments, we have that we're introducing a pavement mural to help prioritize the pedestrian in these zones, to alert truck drivers that pedestrians are crossing and help pedestrians feel like, okay, this is where I belong. Then finally, I just want to highlight that front porch. This area will inevitably flood, and this is a moment where during a storm, pedestrians can get up 4 feet above the existing above the roadway to stay dry under that canopy above. So Kristen, if we move to the next slide, I just want to focus more on the plaza in front of parcel P. And so we have this diagonal movement connecting from parcel O to parcel P, and then the wide connection from the intersection, that top left, that's the intersection of Fig Kennedy and Anchor Way, where pedestrians will be approaching this project site. So they'll be welcomed into the plaza with this wide opening, and then within the plaza, we have these activation zones for movable furniture. We want to keep the space flexible, but kind of highlight the different zones where we can have movable furniture. And we're looking at fun, colorful furniture that services a variety of programming, from eating lunch to lounging, reading a book, chatting with friends, and taking a private cell phone call. So you can kind of push and pull this furniture around, push it away, for social distancing, for example, or move it all into one area if you have an event. And then we also have fixed seating along the edges. We have the built-in benches, and then at the end of this plaza, the terminus on the left side, we have bleachers, and these respond to bleachers that we've built into the porch on the parcel O side, which is just out of view on the right. So these two moments respond to each other and create seating with similar materials to, again, as Kristen noted, kind of connect these two parcels together. And then if we move on to the next slide, we kind of see this space more at eye level with the planting on the left that maintains sight lines, but also makes the space feel buffered from the working waterfront traffic. And then Kristen already touched on the material connections between these two buildings, the wood soffit, the facade murals, and the design of the facade murals will be coordinated with the pavement mural that is in this space plaza, and again continues across up on Penn Way streetscape to that porch. So here we're standing right in front of the bleachers on the parcel P side, looking over at the bleachers on parcel O. Exactly. So
add a comment on this one, because we had something in the chat from Tom Reddy, 4 Point Neighborhood Association, on whether the amenity building was private or public. And Tom, just want to address, so the amenity building, the use has not changed, that remains a private amenity. and it is leased by Ginkgo Bioworks. What we have, and Christine and the team have worked really hard through, is making sure that the public knows that this is a public plaza. So how we program it is going to be really important to encourage activation there. But just wanted to acknowledge your question and respond. Sorry, Christine.
Oh, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Tom. And yes, that's why we've looked at really kind of widening the entrance, which is just kind of over your left shoulder in this view, to really pull people in and have, you know, fun elements with the murals and the furniture, the lighting, etc., to really bring in folks around the neighborhood into this space as kind of this mixing zone for everyone. So if we continue on to the next slide, I'm going to hand it off to Chris, and then I'll take back the mic to talk a little more about the planting design.
Thanks, Christine. Chris Adi, Niche Engineering. And so getting into the resiliency discussion here a little bit for climate change. We've touched on some of this already. This is giving kind of a vertical orientation to the building and how we're reacting to sea level rise and climate change. So if you look at the bottom right, you can see current sea level at 6.5 Boston City base. And the average site grade is about 16.5. So we're about 10 feet above that today, which coincidentally is also the 100-year floodplain in today as well. So to sort of meet these resiliency requirements, we're raising up that first floor and infrastructure 4 feet above that, which if you look at the left side, you can see that's how the front porch sort of is elevated above Fid Kennedy Avenue. And so this is in compliance with the current 2070 sea level rise design flood elevation. And then just sort of, we touched upon this earlier, the Climate Resiliency Fund, realizing that, we're doing what we can to protect our site, but that this is really a district-wide, neighborhood-wide issue. And so, there's participating in this fund is helping to look at that on a larger scale. If you can go to the next slide. And then just as an overall site stormwater management view, we're going to have a slight reduction in impervious area, about 2.3%. So there will be a little bit more green space on site, many more plantings. You can see the green on here. And I think kind of unique for an urban site like this, we're going to have some bioretention areas, which will direct stormwater to and give some surface treatment. It's something you don't see as much in the city because there just isn't space for it, but we have some space here. So we're working with Copley Wolf on that design. We're going to capture and infiltrate the first 1.25 inches of stormwater runoff over the site impervious areas. This is in compliance with the city standards. And sort of the benefit here is that this site overflows through some existing storm drainage infrastructure out pretty much directly to the Boston Harbor, just through the site across the street and out to the harbor. So capturing that first 1.25 inches is going to allow us to treat that water before it goes out to the harbor and improve the stormwater quality that's leaving the site. And then additionally, we'll have additional plantings throughout the site, in the parking lot, and then around the parking lot and around the buildings, which are going to help with heat island effect. And then we're also looking at a reduction in peak runoff rates and volume during, not just the 1% storm, but all the storms that we're looking at, the 2, 5, 10, and 100, or 2, 10, 25, and 100, sorry. A reduction in the rate and volume of runoff that's going to leave the site in those situations. That's going to allow the storm system, the city storm system, to better handle runoff from larger storms in the future. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Christine.
Thanks, Chris. So here's some images on the left there to talk about some of the storm water management features we've introduced. So the permeable pavers in the rideshare pickup drop-off zone, as well as the bioretention areas that Chris touched on in the planting islands and around the parking lot. To the south, we're draining the parking lot into these bioretention areas to utilize the soil and plant material to help filtrate the particles out of the stormwater. And so as far as the planting, we are we're not only using plants that are native to Massachusetts, but to specifically Suffolk County. And we're also looking at salt tolerant species, not only because this area will flood, but also all the road salt from de-icing these roads and the working waterfront during the winter. And then of course, the salt spray in the air, given the proximity to the ocean. So here is some of, not all of, the plants that we'll be using on this site. We have trees, shrubs, ornamental grasses and perennials for seasonal interest, year-round interest around this site. We're also really analyzing where we need to locate really hardy plants, like along the roadways and areas where there will be people, right? Versus the kind of more protected bioretention areas where those species are again specific for bioretention. So coordinating the planting design with the grading and drainage that Chris mentioned. And so if we move on to the next slide, this is just going back to some eye-level perspective renderings. The one on the right there, the planting design rendered here isn't as diverse as the palette, of course, I just showed you. And we've just removed the shade tree we have in this planted island in the foreground, just so I can point out the rideshare drop-off area beyond it with the permeable pavers, as well as see more of the building. But we do actually have more trees than shown in this rendering. Also highlight that we have short-term bike racks right near the front porch. And then on the rendering on the left side, that's the view standing up on the porch, looking back out over the parking area. And so again, these both show just the pavement art on the drive entrance to help create this kind of pedestrianized, continuous experience, for those walking along Fid Kennedy. And then we've widened the sidewalk along the parking lot to create an opportunity for an art element. Again, very excited about all the diverse opportunities for art around the site that tie everything together. And that includes introducing kind of a linear element that will help protect, help buffer the pedestrians from the cars, again, while still maintaining comfortable access to the parking spaces. And then it will terminate in an element down far end, a capstone way that, again, kind of ties the whole project together from Anchor Way all the way down to Capstan Way. We have this continuous streetscape, as well as all these art opportunities that we're very excited about. And yeah, with that, we'll hand it off to Colin to talk about sustainability.
Thanks, Christine. And, Christine, Chris, and Kristen have done a great job going through and summarizing a lot of this stuff. But I'm just going to provide an overview, talk about some of the things that we thought as sustainability consultants really stand out about this project and are quite frankly, like the tremendous public benefit. Starting with this image here, we'll go from outside to inside. I mean, Christine mentioned all the landscaping measures that are put in here. One of the most important things we wanted with this is to have people be able to arrive at the site in a sustainable manner. So ample bike parking and also plenty of throughways for bicycles to safely travel amongst cars in the working waterfront. Once folks get to the site, like Christine mentioned, there's incredible landscaping there, native and salt tolerant species. And as Chris mentioned, we're accommodating sea level rise. So you have water that's dealt with on site with beautiful landscaping treatments. Continuing to work into the building itself, Krista and team have done a really strategic job with the shell of the building. You can see the winter to wall ratio is pretty modest on this project. It's nice, it matches the architecture around, but from a sustainability perspective, it really reduces heat losses associated with the envelope. We consider that kind of one of our first measures towards reducing the carbon footprint of any project, is trying to reduce the loads that the building's seeing in the first place. So with this optimized envelope, modest winter to wall ratio, but excellent daylighting, the next step with the lab building as such is to start to reduce the energy requirements for ventilation air. So the project incorporates high levels of heat recovery Lab buildings typically change over, their own supply of air multiple times per hour. So we try to recover that outgoing heat by reintroducing it into the fresh air stream in the building. That substantially reduces the needs of the heating and cooling system. So our next step is to figure out ways to make that heating and cooling system as efficient as possible. And in this project, we've done that by introducing a substantial amount of heat pumps. So heat pumps will also significantly reduce the amount of fossil fuel consumption, which we'll talk about in the next slide. But before you go over there, on the topic of reducing fossil fuel consumption, I do want to highlight Parcel P down on the right, which will be a fully electric building. The idea of this full electrification is as Massachusetts grid greens over the next few years, hopefully sooner rather than later, and becomes a zero carbon electricity grid, these buildings will become zero carbon as well. So the idea is that they're anticipating and riding along with a greening Boston and a greening Massachusetts. Next slide, please. Right, so about those heat pumps. As I mentioned, lab buildings use a tremendous amount of heat by nature. And again, the reason is because you need high levels of air change. You're constantly moving the air from inside of the building out and bringing fresh air in. And especially in a climate like Boston with all our heating degree days, that can be a really heavy load on heating systems. So the first things that we do is we incorporate that heat recovery. As you're changing out that air, we're trying to recover as much of the energy as possible. But then we need to supply heating to make up for that heat that's lost. And we can do that in a couple of ways. You can burn stuff as we've traditionally done, burn fossil fuels, or you can use heat pumps, which is basically an air conditioner running in reverse. And a heat pump uses electricity to heat up the building. And what's a neat aspect about lab buildings as such is if you provide 20-25% of the building's heating capacity with heat pumps, it'll cover almost the entire year. So if you look at that graph on the top that says fossil fuels, it says add air source heat pumps. The addition of heat pumps has reduced fossil fuel consumption in the building by 90%. So you literally have 10% equivalent to equivalent lab building of fossil fuel usage. So this building is ready to be carbon neutral as the grid greens. And to that extent, if you look at carbon emissions down on the bottom, we're showing 40% remission, 40% reduction in carbon emissions currently, and this is consistent with Boston's projected zoning requirements that are coming about soon, which require all buildings to demonstrate carbon neutrality. So this project is ahead of its time in that respect, and it's kind of paving the way for core and shell lab buildings in the greater Boston area.
And I know that was a lot. So hopefully there are some questions. I'm trying to look in the chat here.
I see one from Sarah that I can answer. Sarah asked, to provide shade and reduce heat island, when will the trees be large enough to provide these benefits? And Sarah, to answer that question, we've through the Article 80 process, we've actually added trees along the whole entire southern stretch of the parking area to provide shade to, as you know, reduce heat island. And so these trees, as well as the ones on the islands, will provide kind of instant, like, a shade on the parking area, but of course will grow over time to provide more and more shade. So we are selecting trees that will grow ultimately large, as well as trees that will be more fast growing to get there sooner rather than later. And just around the whole entire site, being really mindful of creating kind of a diversity amongst the tree canopy, and choosing, again, the right species for the right spot.
Maybe I can jump in with a quick question. Thank you, everybody, for this great presentation. And you really are ahead of the curve with this building, and it's really, particularly on the sustainability issues. I think both with what you're doing energy-wise and also with resiliency, it's just great to see, because I've heard many people in town say lab buildings are going to be really hard to make this efficient, and it's going to be great to have you as a poster child going forward. So thank you. I have a question about the Climate Resiliency Fund, and I don't see anybody from PBDA online, but maybe there is somebody. I'd like to know more. I know how that was started, but I'd be interested to know more how you arrived at what your annual contribution is. And, was there a formula that BPDA used somehow? Was it simply a negotiation? Can you tell us what that is? And secondly, can you tell us more about how PPDA plans to use this money if that's known?
Hey, Bud.
I can
Andrew,
answer
I'll do
this.
my best, and Pat, I don't know if you want to add on, but happy to share the amount. That's public knowledge. It's in our approval. So, and the formula that was done was a proportionate share of our development in relation to the marine park. And so we will be an annual contribution of $250,000 a year, perpetuity. And our ground lease is essentially a 99-year ground lease. So a massive investment that can be available over the lifespan. And so the city can actually pay for improvements and then amortize them like you would a mortgage over the life of those things. So they can go and fund a very, very large improvement and then amortize those costs over the years to the developers. So if they spent $50 million now, spread that cost over 30 years, and we'll continue to pay for them up the share. Capped at $250,000 a year. So I think any specifics of that dollar amount, Bud, and what they're going to use that, I know a seawall has been something that's discussed, and it was kind of the impetus, I think, for this conversation. Pat or Jamie or anybody else, if you've got specifics on first project, but I think it's still early concept to my knowledge, but just creating a vehicle to do this.
But I think if you ask that question of Rich McGinnis, what he would say is that they recognize that they have to do something. They've done, some initial conceptual planning of how one might make the park more resilient. It is essentially completely flat, right? So
Right. So it's some sort of perimeter defense ultimately. Yeah.
yeah, and they don't have a budget number. But I think he saw what was happening and saying we need to jump ahead and institute a mechanism to start to fund this, even if we don't know where it's going to be or what it's going to cost. We want to get ahead of the curve because we lose the opportunity once the development goes through the process to make that ask. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for jumping out ahead on this and at least getting something started, even if all the details are not yet known at this point.
Thank you.
And Sarah, yes, I think the idea is that the funds are committed to the Marine Industrial Park. It's part of a Marine Industrial Park lease agreement. So
we've got more and more questions popping in the chat. Actually, I'm going to pause before I say the next thing. If Kathy asks about escalating over time, is there a reason it's fixed, or I mean, it's fixed?
I think you'd have to ask Rich to begin us that, but I assume debt service might be constant over time. You fund a capital project up front, but the debt service could be constant over time.
Yeah. People who have additional questions can put them in the chat, or they can raise their hands. If you look at the bottom of your screen, one of the options is reactions, and in reactions is the raise hand function. And if you raise your hand, we can call on you, or you can add additional questions to the chat.
I'll ask another one while you're gathering those. And Tom Reddy already asked whether the smaller building will be open for public use. As I look at it, it really reminds me of District Hall, which has become a great community resource down the way. And I wonder if at some point, maybe, and it'll a lot depend on your tenants' preferences, obviously, but whether the cafe in there, if there's going to be a cafe, could be opened up over time, might be something to look at. I think that would greatly enhance the use of the outdoor plaza there.
I think we've mentioned previously that public restrooms would also go a long way.
Yeah, both of those comments were made during our process, and I think, but I do see a lot of parallels to District Hall. I think that the difference is District Hall was created as an amenity for the entire Seaport Master Plan.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, right.
So they were able to leverage scale. But absolutely agree. I think when you look at our tenant, and as they start to talk about the use of this building, they may have a museum aspect. They're very active in the community, and they do want science and the biology that they do to be accessible. So I think while it is an amenity to them, I believe that there does create future opportunities to engage the public through maybe spot uses of this building.
As Alice knows, I'm just always looking for another place to get a lobster roll and a beer. So.
Aaron, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Alice. I'm looking at Obonpan Way, and great that you're continuing the access to the dry dock over that street. But I thought I heard that the loading docks were also off of that street for the building, and that pedestrian use is being encouraged sort of across the, with art and things like that. So I'm wondering if you have a sense of the level of use of that street, both for loading of the building and access to the dry dock. Like, how much use is that going to get, and what kind of interactions might be happening with pedestrians who are crossing over the street?
I can take a stab, but Andrew or someone else can join in as well. To my knowledge, we are maintaining access here, but this gate is not currently used, but we're leaving it open for future use. So it's a little tough to say exactly. We don't see high traffic going in and out of here. So that would be lower traffic. And then our loading docks here is that of a typical lab building. It's not an all day, all night affair. It's a few deliveries a day typically. And it's an internal dock, so trucks can come in and pull right into the building there. We are not encouraging pedestrian use down Anchor Way. This is our bike room. We strategically only located the sidewalk on the Parcel P Plaza so that people would come up and cross at one point. So there's no entrances here. So we're not encouraging people to cross over except for at this kind of very highlighted crossing point. We're also implementing tactile warning strips and bollards here as well. There was conversations with the city whether this should be a tabled crosswalk or not, but we took the path of not, knowing that if a pedestrian has to walk down a strip, they won't feel like they just have the right of way and don't have to look left and right. So we've been really strategic working with the city on that as well, to make sure that trucks see the people, but also people know that this is a trucking area. So that was a large focus, and will be a continued focus and conversation with them once we get into that more. And then the art is really found, there's some along this perimeter here in between the parking and the sidewalk. And then we have trees in between the sidewalk and the street, which actually carries all the way down here. And then it's just these moments here that have a bit of artwork, but we've tried to be pretty strategic in terms of safety as well.
Well, yeah, let me just add a little bit to that, Chris. I think you did a great job explaining it. But with respect to the access to the dry dock, yes, as you pointed out, it's not an active access road right now. Gate's been locked. I think it's been locked a long time. There are, in fact, 3 separate access roads from Pitt Kennedy, one at Anchor Way, one through our site, and then one at Capstan Way is just off the screen to the right. So, that would be up to the ship repair operations to decide which one they use and how often and how many trucks. But presently, they're basically inactive access roads.
Thanks, team. Are there any other questions from folks who are here today? Sarah writes in the chat, it's a challenge to make a private space welcoming to the public, even with inclusive open space. And she echoed the comment I made about restrooms would be an easy solution for the public to feel welcome. Thanks, Sarah.
Alice, I can respond to that just quickly. Sarah, we completely agree that it'll be a challenge, and I think that is really on our building operations staff and working with Kingo for programming. And the public restroom, so I think that the space, that's a comment that we've heard. We have not, quite frankly, on that, but it's something we'll continue to hear. There's just challenges on our allocation of that space and the commitments that have been made already for it. But we understand the comment.
Kathy asks, Andrew, if there's a program plan or budget for the plaza, or I'm guessing it's for public space. Kathy, you're welcome to join in or speak up.
I would say we're still early there. The building would be opened likely in June of 2024. So there's no plan that's been in place, and I think the budget would fall under an operating expense of the building, and that's how we would manage that. So the budget hasn't been set, and space or plans have to go in place. But other than just a general feeling and commitment that it's important.
Thanks.
Kathy, do you have any other questions?
No, it's really just that we find that without programming, the activation doesn't really happen.
Alice, it feels like we may be ready to wrap up this morning.
That'll work. I'm gonna go for it.
Well, I was just going to thank the project team and everybody else for participating this morning. We had a small group, but I think it was a really good conversation. I think we're going to leave the project developers with a few additional things to think about, but I want to commend them again for doing a great job in many respects to this building. And I think it will become exemplary as we go forward. Kathy's made a good point at the end there. It's not just enough to provide a great space. You've got to figure out how to help people use it quite actively. And we're increasingly interested in seeing these spaces not become exclusive in their use, around the waterfront. So I think it's really important to do that.